when I became a mom, I really, really, really thought I would love it like so much. Like it would be, complete. I'd be complete, like my purpose. Right.
Yep.
And then it was like, oh, wait, this is really fucking hard. And I actually really like my independence. I forgot and didn't really realize how much my independence mattered to me and freedom.
Hey there. Welcome to another episode of Carve Your Own Fucking Path, a podcast made to inspire you to create a life and business on your own terms. You'll hear candid interviews with people who have boldly decided to blaze their own trail, and the occasional solo show with me, your host. I'm Willa McDonough, on-camera coach, storyteller, and remote video producer. 5 years ago, I moved from my home base of San Francisco to the coast of Portugal, taking a big leap into the unknown. Some called it courageous. I called it carving my own fucking path. Today, I live in Lisbon and run a business that elevates your online presence, helping you show up confidently on camera to create videos that showcase your brand and personality so you can get more visibility and attract clients by being yourself. If you're just starting out in business or you've been doing it for a while, you're sure to pick up tidbits of actionable advice and hopefully feel inspired by stories from people who have chosen the unconventional and sometimes messy path. And if you've been waiting for a sign to start carving your own fucking path, this is it. I'm so happy you're here. Welcome to the podcast, Kelly Brusch.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Thank you for taking the time. You're a doula and a birth educator. You have been traveling and being an entrepreneur at the same time, mother of two, and you have a lot to share, I know, on many different things. So I always like to start with a bit of your backstory. So this is, about carving your own path, but also looking at where you are now, kind of connecting the dots a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Which they do connect ultimately. Even if it doesn't.
They do
like
when
it.
you look back at it in hindsight, but sometimes in the middle of it, it's like, what am I doing? Why am I here? I'm in the dark hole. And I definitely had lots of those moments.
You did. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. Well, so just like a little intro of myself.
The past. Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Start wherever you want.
Sure. So I have always been a helper and an educator. And it's funny because we learned right before we started recording that we both went to TAM, which is like a high school in Northern California, very like open-minded, liberal. And I feel like it, it obviously made a big difference in just like my mindset. But one of the opportunities I had at TAM was to join this group called Peer Resource, where I learned how to basically teach my peers about sex education, birth control. I would take my peers to the teen clinic, get them set up on birth control, pregnancy testing, and then cry in the car and a lot of emotional sort of support. And I just loved it. And I believed in it. And I thought it was really important that teens knew about their bodies and how to go get, healthcare that they needed. And I loved the one-on-one of that. And I went on to school and studied psychology, went and got my master's in counseling and kind of thought that was more my path, like a traditional path. And I did that for quite some time, but it was once I had babies myself that I really realized that, oh my gosh, someday I really want to help women and families in this space and make a difference around just the experience of birth, because how the healthcare setting traditionally supports women and families through birth, it's like you're coming and you're sick and there's a problem, when in fact birth is a normal, healthy part of being a human. And sometimes there are some higher risk situations, but most of the time, not so much. And so I knew that I would someday probably enter birth work of some capacity, but it just wasn't the time for me in life at all. I had a little baby myself, meanwhile, I was married and my husband had a career that he was pursuing, and he was going to get a PhD, and I needed to make money, and I needed to be a mom. And so I had these dreams and this vision of how to apply creating little businesses when I was young, and a lot of like babysitting and counseling and coming up with like babysitters club as a kid. So I always sort of had those entrepreneurship sort of energy, but I just couldn't really do it at the time. And also, have the goal of our family, like my husband getting his PhD and having kids. So I went on
I'm curious. Sorry. So I'm going to go farther back to high school.
Oh yeah.
Because I do remember the peer resources and, like the people that took charge and really were there to like, not be the teacher, but be one of, again, a peer, but to create a space where there was this comfort level around talking about sex.
Yeah.
When most people were doing it badly, I don't know, but just, these days I know it's much different. There's so much more content out there and less, hopefully less like stigma or shame. But were you sexually active in high school? Did you have to come from that place? Okay. So you were already like, I'm okay. Yeah. I'm just curious if.
Yeah, definitely. I became sexually active like probably sophomore years. And then right around then, like, joined peer resource. And also I have a very open relationship with my mom. And so it wasn't like I came from a sheltered place and like just had to figure this out through school. Like I already had the support kind of at home. And, but I realized that a lot of my friends didn't have that same kind of like openness or awareness. I also have always just been fascinated by like the body and human development. And I was that like nerdy kid that like got the book, in 5th grade about your changing body and like how to know your period's coming. I'm like, yay, I want my period. Like that's just me through and through.
Okay. Yes, that's what I was curious about.
Yeah. So I've always just been like open, interested, curious, fascinated, and also surprised by how many people are not. I'm just like, this stuff kind of matters. Like it really can shape lives. And, there's a lot of problems with how teens and women are supported through their sexuality, healthcare, family planning decisions, all this kind of stuff that's like very disempowered and riddled with like racism and patriarchy. And the more people that are just like aware of where it's broken and where you have agency in the process, like the more we can push the needle and make it better. Right. So I've always looked at just like women's health, public health, and just like the human experience from a place of like, it could be better. And when you actually know that and then think you're worthy of better, then, big things can happen and it can really shape your life in a different path.
Definitely.
I really believe that. Yeah.
Yes. So let's touch on the worth, the self-worth.
Yeah.
A bit, which is a huge, huge conversation, but you're bringing it up as it sounds like you recognize this from a young age about when you value yourself, you feel like you're worth it. And that shows up in healthcare, in sex, right? If you're being reckless or careless, it's a bit of a reflection of, okay, maybe you don't feel that you're worthy. So was this something that you were conscious of then about your body and that you deserved a certain level of care?
I think so. I don't know if it was conscious. I definitely believed that, I didn't want like to get pregnant or STDs and that like, I was worthy of like a respectful partner, even in high school. Like I had a boyfriend. It was like my long-term high school boyfriend. We lost our virginities to each other. So there was like kind of some reverence in the experience, I guess, although super fucking awkward and like, lame,
Yeah.
but still from that vantage point, I would say I did expect things from him, communicate things, and held myself to a standard. Sometimes you're just a dumb teenage girl, right? Moving on to college. So, but I would say my worth has grown over time, but that I just really, I just did feel like respect. I felt like respect was required. And the more I respected myself, the more I expected others to respect me. Right.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And so then the counseling that you were doing, so you went into that field. So you knew you really loved this one-on-one. Were you counseling anything specific?
Yeah. So I ended up working at a university at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. I was doing academic and career counseling, but mostly it was like my primary focus was the kids that were on their way of getting kicked out of college or on their way back in after getting kicked out. So it was like a lot of the students that were struggling for one reason or another, and work, helping them through that point in their journey.
And then regarding family and everything like that, were you thinking that you definitely wanted children, that was something that you had on your plan, let's just say?
It was, yeah. I definitely had it on my plan. Once I had one, I kind of was like, whoa,
this is
maybe I'm
hard.
good here. Like before I had one, it was like, oh, I want a big family and lots of kids. And my husband felt the same way. And then we had one and we're like, ooh, wow.
Yeah.
We do have two, but the second one was not a planned pregnancy. So, so we had an adjustment there. It's working out great now, but it was really a hard time. Yeah.
Yes. What is the age difference?
They're 3 years apart.
Okay. So, could you touch on your birth story?
Yeah.
And your experience?
Yeah. Well, having the mindset that I did, I knew quite early on in my pregnancy, I would get a doula for my birth. And should I say what a doula is, or would your audience know that? Yeah. Okay. So a doula is a non-medical person that comes into your birth and supports you emotionally, physically, and provides education. So it's not somebody that's handling like the medical care. I like to say, your doctor, your midwife is caring for the baby. Your doula is caring for you and your experience. And your doula is teaching you, they're not hired by a medical system or your doctor. They're hired by you. And so there's no like strings attached to the system. I mean, we do, of course, have standards of care and like go through a training process and certification, but it's not regulated in the way that the healthcare system is. And it gives us a lot more autonomy and the ability to just be like frank and direct about what we see. And we see a lot. We, get to watch firsthand providers in action and get to see all the different providers and how they approach things in all the different hospitals. So a lot of times we like know a lot more than, a nurse would know who just works with one team, one hospital sort of thing. But anyways, that's
okay. So you go into appointments and you're kind of a partner, a birth partner, but through the entire pregnancy, or is it at a certain stage that you step in?
Yeah. Most people hire me once they get into their second trimester. So by then they're feeling like, okay, I'm definitely pregnant and it's like getting real and it's time to start thinking about the birth a little bit more. So it's really common for people to call me when they're like 16, 17, 18 weeks pregnant. And I do 3 prenatal visits with them. So I do like a lot of prenatal education with them. We talk about making a birth plan. And it's not like planning your birth so that you can control it, but it's more of a tool to understand what are all the options and all the situations you could find yourselves in birth. Like, what will the hospital experience be like from the point of like walking through the door to leaving, and all of the interventions that might be offered to you and why you would accept and decline and all of that. So lots of education around that, as well as just teaching both like the pregnant person and their partner how to support each other through the sensations of labor. So how to, help them through a contraction, how to create a mood, like where on the body to literally like press, rub, squeeze to be able to help, mitigate and bring down the strong sensations of those contractions. So hands-on kind of stuff, as well as postpartum planning too. I mean, that's a big part of what I like to touch on as a birth doula, because yes, the birth really matters, but so does postpartum. And there's a lot that can happen there too. Yeah. So I do work with them, and I do that either virtually or in their home. Sometimes a combination of both. I don't usually go to appointments with my clients to their doctor's visits, but they usually call me like right after and tell me everything that happened. And their doctors give them like 3 minutes to ask a question. And they're like, I don't really understand it. I didn't feel like I had time. And so I get to help unpack a lot of that with them and prep them for the next appointment and what to ask and how to phrase it and that sort of thing too. So
it's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so in your experience, you have a doula, you're having a kid for the first time. Of course, you can read all the books, right? And have the birth plan, and then you're actually going through it.
Mm-hmm.
So when you went through it, maybe 2 questions, but when did you have is there a defining moment where you're like, this is what I'm meant to do?
That came with my second child more than my first child. Just because my first birth, I really did put a lot of intention into it and get a lot of support. And I thought it was like the most badass, crazy, amazing thing I'd ever done in my life. And I was so proud. And my birth didn't go exactly to plan, but like pretty damn close. And so I felt just like pretty positive about it. But my second birth did not go that way. And I was living in a new state. I had a new doula. She was amazing, but the baby was breech. And there were all these things that basically were out of my control. And I thought should be in my control. I'm like educated and empowered and all this sort of stuff, and had the doula and the right resources. And I'm like, well, what the fuck? I thought I set myself up for success here. And that was another important life lesson that had to come my way to show me that there's a difference between preparation and control. And I feel like I really needed to have that experience before going into birth work, because I understand that firsthand personally that preparing for your birth is not about getting a certain outcome in your birth. We hope for a good outcome or the outcome that you want, but that's actually not the purpose. And how to manage expectations prenatally about the birth experience. And I really come at it from a place that if you feel like you consented to each and everything that happened to you in your pregnancy and birth, regardless of the outcome, you're going to feel good about it because you were a part of that. And that's a way of talking about birth preparation and the actual birth experience that's different, that I don't think I would have been capable of doing after my first.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And so then it's second pregnancy, that's when you had a bit of this realization, this is the path that I'm supposed to take.
Yeah, it was afterwards. I had a hard birth, and then I went into a pretty tough postpartum as well. And that, was really my kind of darkest point, was when my baby was probably about 6 months, 7 months old. And just, I I wasn't in alignment in my life. Like I wasn't really putting my desires first. I was giving over too much to too many people and too many places, and was like meltdown central. It's like you're holding on tight, sort of like getting by day, but surviving, not thriving. It was that. So when I first got into birth work, I started on the postpartum side, actually. And I had really wanted to use more my counseling experience to do postpartum coaching and work with women after baby on identity, self-worth, understanding your desires and how those desires practically play out during this really like hard time of life where there isn't logistically a lot of space or energy for yourself, but how can we find it, and why are you worthy of even finding it? So that's the work I dived into immediately when I first left, my other work to be able to like move into birth work traditionally. Okay. So, but then I got a major wrench thrown into me, and my husband got a postdoc offer in France that would require our family to move to France. And I had just started my business and was getting clients, and it was like, oh, I'm finally doing my entrepreneurship thing. This is amazing. And then it was like, oh, you could move to France in 2 months if you want and have this amazing experience. And I was like, well, yeah, I really want to do that too. Like, that sounds amazing too. So we did, but it definitely put a new twist on my entrepreneurship journey by doing that too.
Okay. I mean, this is I don't have any children. So the thought of having a 3-year-old, I'm guessing 3 or 4, and then, 6 months old or a year, and being an entrepreneur, it's a lot. And having a husband going through school.
Yeah, it was.
It's a lot. So, okay. Yeah. Again, the self-worth comes up again, because you are then coaching women specifically that are going through this time. So when you say postpartum, that, it's okay, post-birth, but I've heard of, and most people have, I think, postpartum depression. So is that sort of what you mean? Like you're helping them with the hormonal shifts, I guess, or I don't know, is there some distinctive things that happen?
Yeah. Well, postpartum depression is really, really common, as is postpartum anxiety. And these are, and postpartum anxiety is even more diagnosed and common than postpartum depression. Okay. And it is a clinical diagnosis, due to hormones, can be medicated. And you definitely need to see like a doctor or a psychiatrist to get diagnosed with that, treated for that. That is not me. I wasn't doing clinical kind of work. So my space would be more for somebody who, doesn't have that clinical diagnosis, but like definitely feels like they're treading water each and every day, and really perhaps suffering from this reshape of identity of who they were before having a child to who they are now, and struggling to find any time for themselves, and like really having quality time with themselves. I always say like, it's really sweet to go carve out time for like a mani-pedi, but like, are you really digging deep into the deeper stuff? Like a mani-pedi can be great, but what's the intention here? Are we like, or like you're going for wine night with your friends, like feels so good, but like, what's the intention behind that? Are we numbing or are we releasing? Like lots of just like digging deeper into how we care for ourselves during this really stressful time of life of being a new parent and navigating, your identity, your relationship with your partner, your like logistics of yourself, like how do you take care of yourself? It's just a lot. So that's the kind of stuff I was working on. And I would do these 10-session packages with my clients. So we would meet at first every week, and then like split out to every 2 weeks, and then have a monthly up until the end, take across, I think it was like 3 or 4 months, and really beautiful experience. And before, when I moved to France, I, could move it virtually, the sessions, but this was like pre-COVID, where not everybody was about virtual counseling in that way, right? And I also had a massive time zone to work with too that I found really, really challenging. So especially with the kids at home, and then I like didn't have childcare for a while, so it petered off until I moved back to the States. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, curious about identity with you and your experience with being someone who is there for others and helping solve problems. I mean, essentially that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
In your own experience, what, like being a mom, how did that change, or did that change your identity?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot. Well, I always seek support and help through counselors and coaching myself. Like when I need a tune-up, I literally think of it like that. Like counseling to me is like the equivalent of your car's oil change. Like it has to be done every once in a while just to create some pause and space in your life to reflect. So I'm always committed to that for myself. And you know, I'm like willing to show up and do the work. When I became a mom, I really, really, really thought I would love it like so much. Like it would be, you know, complete. I'd be complete, like my purpose. Right.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh, wait, this is really fucking hard. And I actually really like my independence. I forgot and didn't really realize how much my independence mattered to me and freedom. So a lot of like wrestling with that and needing to, and then you have like mom guilt too, because there's the comparison game with how other people are showing up as mothers and families. And so, yeah, a lot of work on like releasing mom guilt, understanding what my desires and needs actually are, and then also then how to actually ask for them. Both like admit it to myself, I'm worthy, and then ask for the support I need from my husband, from my family, prioritizing money to spend, to ask, you know, get help, that sort of thing. Was a process and always is a process, but I've done some things in motherhood that I know a lot of other people haven't done to take care of myself. Like the most extreme example is when I was in France, I had this opportunity to join a friend to go get my yoga teacher training in Bali, but it would require me to go for a month. And when she asked me if I would come with her, I was like, I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I'm living in France and I'm barely working. And my husband's at work all day. So no, I absolutely can't come. And she's like, are you sure? And I said, no, actually, I'm not sure. Let me think about this for a little while. And I thought about it and I'm like, well, do I really want this? Yeah, I really want it. And actually my kids are in preschool. And like, we have some friends that could maybe help, and I'm not working and I have some time. Like it wasn't that expensive because it was like, yeah, in Bali, had a cheap program and stuff. And so I went to my husband and I said, I want to do this. And he's like, I'm so proud of you for asking.
Wow.
Yeah,
I just got the chills.
Yeah,
So
he was
cool.
just like so proud that I asked. And I knew he would support me, but it was like a really cool first thing for him to say. So yeah, I went and did that for a month, and you better believe I was the only mom in that group of 25
I bet.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about the mom guilt, or a different kind of guilt, I guess, for leaving?
Yeah.
Did you experience that?
I had a little bit leading up to it. Yeah, a little bit, but I felt that if I was working towards empowering women to prioritize their needs and, you know, ask for the things that they want in life, that I have to do the same. And I had already had plenty of practice up to that point of saying like, I need the morning off to exercise, or like, I'm going to go away for the weekend or have a girls' day, or I need to go like get journal or something in the woods, like whatever. I've had enough practice doing that. This was the next level step for me and the next big ask. And so I felt like I needed to challenge myself to do it, to keep growing and evolving and what I'm, teaching other people to do for themselves. So it wasn't easy breezy to go do it. I took a social media hiatus the whole time I was there because I just didn't even want the energy of like, she's in Bali right now. Like, what's she doing? Isn't she a mom? Like, how can we afford that? Like, I didn't want all of those sort of judgments. I didn't even like tell a lot of my family I was going, but I knew I would, once it was done and everybody was safe and good and it worked out, I would share more afterwards. And so that's how I managed it.
Good for you. That takes so much courage.
It did.
On so many different levels, all the, things you mentioned, because you're doing something that ultimately is for everyone else's benefit too.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So many people, it's this martyr, I'm going to be there. And of course you're there all the time, but this is also going to be an enriching experience, which then is passed down. And then you're modeling for your children. Do you have daughters?
Daughters. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know why I had this feeling they were daughters. So you were setting such a good example. Okay. So this is a good segue, or a good, not segue, but just time to ask about something that I'm so curious about. So being a person that doesn't have children, at an age where it's either like you might have to adopt, or it may not happen, let's say. And for me, it's the partnership that would be number one. I do have a few friends that have done it on their own, which is very courageous as well. And so for you, you thought that having kids would complete you or, sort of fulfill you in some way. The question is ultimately, do you feel that it did? Or that, I don't know, because I've spoken to someone about regret. He's an expert in regret. And I asked the same thing. What is, as someone who has not had children, but I'm jumping ahead when I'm 80 and saying, I wish I did. The one thing in life, the most natural thing to do is to have children. And it didn't happen for me. So it's almost like, I don't know, what can you tell other women out there and men? Because I have this conversation a lot with people that are my age and they're like, I don't think it's going to happen, but it makes me sad, that it might not, but yeah.
So what I would say about that is that, yes, there are lots of ways to create a family now that is really a privilege of our generation and something new that other generations didn't always have access to. And it comes with a whole nother bag of questions, logistics, questions of like privilege and access. And also, just like the option to even ask the question brings up, a lot, right? As a doula, I've supported families who have done like IVF later in life. Like one of my first client actually was 49 years old having her first baby. Wow. So I'm seeing firsthand, just like from the doula perspective, of how this like both shows up in like mindset and approach in pregnancy and birth, and then also witnessing firsthand like the postpartum experience and all of that. So I'm seeing how common it is, and I experienced this both here in California and when I was doing doula work in Oklahoma. So these kinds of questions are questions that people are asking all over the country and all over the world. So I think normalizing it first and foremost is really important, that this is a new territory to be navigating, and there isn't a right way forward. And much like every single decision in life, there isn't one way. It's like the way for you, right? And being able to have ways of sitting with yourself and knowing yourself and your heart and what your body tells you, to be able to help be that compass for the direction and the path that you do want to go in life. And, really trying to look at and examine what your own true desires are versus what society and culture's desires are for you. I feel like I haven't experienced this firsthand, but I would imagine that would be one of the biggest parts of this journey if you're in this like questioning kind of place of what to do, with do I want children? Do I not? Is like really understanding your own desires versus society's or family. And then just like owning what you do decide and also being okay with changing your mind too, right? It's like, we don't have to pretend that we've made a decision and we never question that decision. Like this is very black and white thinking. I have to challenge myself every day not to live in black and white thinking and just to be comfortable with gray areas and changing minds and like seeing both points of view. But of course, with like having a child, you have a child, then you have a child, right? Or you don't have a child and that window has passed and you don't have a child, right? Again, I feel like if you're making a conscious decision, either way, you're going to work it out. It won't be perfect. It's not like your fairy tale will be complete one way or another. But if you're making those decisions from a place of like groundedness and intention, you'll make the right decision for you. Right.
I love that. Yeah. And it is that black and white kind of thinking that gets in the way a lot of the time, because sometimes it's all up here for me a lot of the time, or it's a feeling, a twinge. And I guess it's, and I had this conversation a lot where some days it sounds great. Other days it's a hell no. Thank God I don't, the freedom thing you brought up is so huge because I live in Portugal. I've made decisions on my own. I don't, it's the ultimate freedom in a lot of ways. So it's always going to be a sacrifice, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah. The
one thing that motherhood and parenthood has done for me, and I think I know my husband would agree. The day to day is intense when they're little. It's just like, I don't know anybody that's like, this is fun. Like they're very sweet and wonderful and you love them so much, but like the day to day is a grind and it is that way for a season of your life. But as somebody like myself, who's so interested in like personal development, growth, the spiritual path, like knowing more, going deeper, my children allow me to experience that in a way that I can't imagine another thing could trigger me. And I mean like the deepest work in the hardest ways, like not the fun personal development, like the real hard fucking look in the mirror when your 3-year-old starts bossing your husband around their dad and you realize she is saying to him what I say to him, like that's a surface example, but yes. And you're just like, oh my God. So if you're willing and interested in like some looking at yourself hard in the mirror and really working on releasing like even like intergenerational trauma and not repeating the patterns of your parents or your ancestors and like breaking that cycle, it can be really amazing to go through the exercise of parenting for that purpose too. And I think that's something that I don't hear a lot of people talking about, but I think about all the time.
That is so true. It's the biggest mirror. We know our relationships are, but then seeing how, you're completely the everything to this person as well. So like that's a lot of responsibility, but also comes with that, the love and the joy and everything else. So that was really well said.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And so for you in your process, I guess, after that experience, going back to Bali,
Yeah.
for example, so coming back and what other realizations did you have as far as like, okay, showing up and asking for what you need, people kind of stepping in, did everything fall into place?
Yeah, it did. And now I'm remembering another really sweet thing my husband said before I left. I was dealing with some of this mom guilt, and he was like, okay, so are you really going to go to Bali and have this like immersion experience where you have this opportunity for immense spiritual growth and like releasing and learning? And you're going to spend that whole time just dealing with mom guilt? Come on. You've already worked through some of that shit. Like, please don't spend a month working through your mom guilt. Can you just handle that right now and like go deeper when you go to Bali? And I was like, oh, so good. That is so good. So I wouldn't say I released it completely and it was never present, but that did stick with me to allow myself to like be even more vulnerable. So everything, yes, did work out on the home front while I was gone. I do think that a lot of this has to do with like me trying to control how my children are on the day to day and like what they eat and their schedules and, all that. And it's like, that's cool to create those boundaries, but also children need to learn how to exist in all kinds of environments and with all kinds of parents and guides and learn lessons that aren't provided just by me. And so it's just healthy for kids. It also is healthy for my husband because he's like in control and he's, getting his experience to bond with his kids without me being like, ooh, we need broccoli with that meal, just dumb stuff like that. So it's good for everybody. But yeah, for me, like I was able to clear out and go to dark, deep places in Bali because I allowed myself to. And I think because I had kids at home, I'm like, had this extra motivation to really make it worth my time. Really take it seriously. Like I really worked hard in my teacher training program. It was like the most physically challenging thing I'd ever put myself in my life. Oh my God. Wow. Like C-section recovery, two births, like soft mama, just like trying to go for like spiritual connectedness. But it's like, no, you need to chaturanga right now. And I'm like, like on my knees, you mean?
Girl, nope.
Nope.
8 hours a day.
Yeah. So it was physically challenging, which brought up all kinds of opportunity to work through some shit. So it was very worthwhile. I highly recommend people doing stuff like that for themselves if they can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So true. And yeah, the time thing is also something I'm curious about too, because when you have so much time, when you don't have kids, let's say, to then going from pretty much the most extreme shift you could ever go through. So is your time away from them, or in general, are you able to look at time and how you spend it and what's worthy differently?
Like when I was away from them for the month, you mean?
Even in general, because I think that sometimes like I just have so much time, like to do these things. But when you don't have the time because it's dedicated to raising a human, how does that shift?
Yeah. Well, when I do have my time, like where I'm not on as mom, I use that time really efficiently because I'd say I'm actually way more productive and motivated and intentional with my time because there is less of it just for me. And so I do think it helps me like as an entrepreneur. It's a double-edged sword because, being an entrepreneur while raising young kids is really, really challenging and exhausting and hard. But at the same time, you're super efficient. okay, I only have 2 hours to do my social media planning for the month. So I'm going to get it done in those 2 hours instead of just being able to like, oh, I could do it later today or tomorrow even. But I think this is a personality thing too. Like if you're lean towards procrastination, having kids could help fix that, I guess. But yeah, I'm pretty efficient with my spare time or even my personal time too. Like I know my kids are going to wake up, at 7. So if I want quiet time in the morning for a cup of coffee and a 10-minute meditation, like I have to get up at 6 and get it done, or else it's not happening that day. I couldn't just do it later. Right. So it does create, I think, some more restrictions, but maybe with opportunity too, with the right mindset.
Mm-hmm. And in your relationship, how did having kids shift that dynamic? I know that many people don't make it through.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah. Well, we work really, really, really hard at it. Really hard at it. And I'm very proud of that. And I have a partner who's willing to communicate, go to counseling when needed. I'm obsessed with counseling. Like I do it as a tune-up for me, and I do it as a tune-up for our marriage. Like to me, it's a non-negotiable, and he has pretty much always been on board for that too. So I feel fortunate for that. And it wasn't like a hard convince to get him to want to examine our relationship and talk about things. So learning how to communicate with each other has been probably the biggest thing, and practicing and then like relearning the lesson we learned 4 years ago all over again, and just being willing to keep trying. And then also just like a lot of taking turns. Before, when there wasn't kids, we could kind of pursue our own stuff out in the world in the day and then come back together, and it's like sweet. But when you have kids, there's just not that same logistics. So there's been a lot of like needing to take turns for each other's dreams and goals. And I would say he does that more gracefully than I do. I supported him through getting a PhD and his postdoc and moving all around the country and the world for that while putting my dreams on hold. And I did it, but I wasn't always like the most graceful about that. And it's only been in the last 2 years that it's been my time to be able to like him, actually have the full-time job with the benefits, and me be able to start really pursuing entrepreneurship in like a full-time kind of way. So it's really nice. I feel like I'm in my time right now, and he's been really gracious about it after all these years of it being his time. So,
yeah, that's big. And why entrepreneurship for you?
I think it's twofold. Like one is I don't want to be part of a system that already has like it defined and rules, because I feel confined in that. And I feel like you're more limited when you're part of a system to like really reach your potential, to help people reach their potential. So like, for example, as a counselor in a university system, like just a lot of policies, procedures, red tape, like all that kind of stuff that you spend so much of your time doing admin or like logistics instead of like actually doing the work. So that really annoyed me always, just like about practicing like in the helping professions in a system. So I feel like you could have more of an impact. But the other part of it too is entrepreneurship is also a creative endeavor, and it's a chance to let your creativity come out. And it's also personal development in itself too, because you're really challenged all the time. It's another opportunity to look in the mirror, to examine your habits, your default thinking. So I feel like for me, it's very challenging. It's definitely not the easy, simple path. Sometimes I wish I could just be like simple and like take a paycheck and be good with that. but I've tried that route and I'm not. So I guess this is just like the way to go this way. But I love the networking aspect of it. I love the creativity. I love the freedom. And I think it's really conducive to parenthood too, even though it's kind of intense, but you're also creating your life and you can do so with intention and it can be beautiful. So it's good for now. See how long it goes.
Well, I think you're going to do just fine. And I've seen your website, and I think it's just beautiful because it's about kind of writing your own birth story. But again, it's not about control. It's about, coming with this intention and also going back to the self-worth. You're worth it, to really put this time and energy and focus into creating the biggest moment of your life.
Yeah.
And how you want that to kind of look and feel. So what would you say, and you did just touch on a, something you're proud of, which is in your relationship, but what would you say is something that you're the most proud of right now?
Well, I'm the most proud of starting my birth doula business, like by far. I started it when I was living in Oklahoma, which wasn't a place I knew I wanted to actually live in for the long term. And like old pattern thinking would have just said, well, just wait to start your business to your living where you want to live, because starting a physical business I do have an online component for the education piece, but like birth doula, I'm in the hospital or the birth center or your home with you. Like it's got to be in person. So why start that in a place you don't want to live? And I was telling myself that old story time and time again. And I don't know what it was, but I do know what it was. He almost got a job offer in California 2 years ago. And then it didn't go through last minute. And I was just like devastated, like on the floor crying. And then I was just had to pick myself back up to be like, well, there is purpose in being here still in Oklahoma. What are you going to do with it? And I had two dreams at that time. One was to buy our first house, and two was to start my doula business finally. And I just said, I'm going to just go ahead and do both and pursue both and see where it goes. There's something to learn in it. And I'll just deal with it later. If we move in a year, it's fine. And I did both those things. Like we bought our first house and I started my doula business, and I did it anyways, even though it didn't feel like practical on paper. And both was a huge success. My doula business I got booked up completely within like 3 months of starting my doula business, and to practice doula support in a place like Oklahoma, where, women's rights are like bottom of the barrel. And there's just a lot of like disempowerment in the birth process, a lot of health disparities, a lot of just like overt racism and access issues. And to be able to show up and do birth work and to meet the incredible other like pioneers in Oklahoma who are literally out there like making themselves vulnerable by doing this work because it's threatening to the systems. These people are we're a privilege to be able to work amongst and to learn from while I was there. So I'm just like so proud for going for it and starting up my business. The universe delivered me clients, and I had an amazing learning experiences while I was there, and getting to experience birth, and then now bringing this business to San Diego. And, my client calendar is already filling up here, and I've lived here for like 3.5 weeks. And so I'm just I know, wow. I'm just very proud of trusting my gut and instinct, and also, just like owning what I want and saying it and going for it. So, yeah.
Well done. That is, that's a lot. Again, you can't, there's like, I don't know. Well, maybe you would agree, but timing is everything.
Yes.
So in that, if you were to give advice to someone else and they kind of said the same thing, look, it's not the right time, not the right location, time. How would you guide someone to make a move or a decision if maybe the timing isn't right?
Mm-hmm. But I would dig deeper into what about the timing isn't right. Say more about that, because there have been times in my life where the timing was not right. It's not right. And then, but I've said that same statement in many different quote timings, but digging a little bit deeper to what do you mean about that? So, like, instead of like, oh, Kelly, the timing's not right. You live in France and you have no childcare and you have an 18-month-old and a 4-year-old and you just moved here and your husband just broke out in um, shingles over the stress. Right now is not the time to start your doula business. Okay, that adds up. But Oklahoma, Kelly, is like, oh, it's not a good time. You don't want to live here. Well, you don't want to live here. What does that have to do with doing your business? Like, digging a little bit deeper into like, what about it is not the right timing, and understanding, oh, is it actually you're feeling kind of like scared to put yourself out there and your desires to be true and public? Because when you start a business, you got to go online, you got to create your Instagram, you're a brand, like it's very vulnerable. So is that what you're afraid of? Or is it that, like what exactly is it here? And so when I was able to uncover that the fears were more about the vulnerability of starting a business than like actually there is not time right now, or like this wouldn't elevate my life. This would de-escalate my life. I think that's a good question to ask yourself. And either way, it's going to be hard. Not living your dreams is really hard. And living your dreams is really hard too. So, it's like, where are you at? And which version of hard is going to work best for you right now?
That's a great answer. Got to go deeper.
Every time.
Fear is always going to be there, and I think it's just, you have to, look deep, because again, we're storytellers. We're telling stories all the time. And then that becomes your reality. So that's very cool that you were in a place that you absolutely thought would be the worst place. And look what happened. You've seen an extreme, of course, coming from California. I mean, it must be a completely different world there.
Completely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And, there are all types of people everywhere you go.
Right.
But the energy of Oklahoma is different than the energy of California. Like the first impression, the culture is just very, very, very different. Yeah. But individuals are the same when you actually get to know them. So that's kind of interesting and fun. And we met some amazing people in Oklahoma that will be lifelong friends with us. So fascinating stuff, this world.
It is, definitely. And I think that's a really good point. Underneath it all, we're all the same. Again, mothers want to protect their children, do the best. Fathers, it's the universal thing. And I want to commend you for helping people do that process and really helping them go deeper, because in the world of healthcare, on that medical level, it's very black and white, seemingly, and very disconnected. So I think the work of a doula especially is so much deeper and spiritual, from my understanding.
That's how I approach it. Definitely. It's not for everyone. I definitely go deep and go hard, but that's all I know how to do. So, if you're like ready to show up and examine yourself and examine the process and like really create an experience for yourself, learning those lessons before you bring a child into the world is really can serve you a lot. It's like, doing some of the deep work before you have the logistics of a baby to take care of. It can really help shape postpartum experience too, and then well into your identity of motherhood. So I really believe in it. I see firsthand the difference that it makes in people's lives to approach their birth from this way. And I feel very proud of the work that I'm doing.
What are you most looking forward to right now?
Hmm. Okay. Well, as a doula, you're on call pretty much all the time because babies come when they come, and most of them come in the middle of the night and on weekends.
Do they?
Yeah.
And holidays?
Sometimes I'm gone for 5-6 hours away at a birth, but most of the time it's more like 20 to 30 hours I'm gone. So it's not work for like the faint of heart. It's really, really depleting work. And you have to create a lot of like self-care rituals around that. Well, I have to sustain it, and boundaries. So what I'm really looking forward to is I'm off call for the next month right now. And I'm looking forward to things like having more than one glass of wine at dinner and going on a trip with my family for a week up north and visiting some friends and family up there and just being out of town and feeling, more free. Like I don't have to be attached to my phone all the time. So I love the work that I do, but I also really value my independence and freedom. So being able, and I intentionally create pockets where I'm off call so that I can have that balance and then show back up for the work more, just full again. So that's what I'm looking forward to right now.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
And you're in a new city.
Yeah.
So
I'm just exploring it, like so happy. Yeah. Love it.
Yes. That's great. How can people find you? And you do work online. So there is the opportunity to work virtually with you.
Yeah. So I am active on Instagram. My handle is at doula Kelly Ray, and it's KELLYRAE. And my website is kelly-ray.com. So those would be the two places to learn the most about me and my work. From a virtual perspective, I love educating pregnant people on the birth planning process. And I have a free birth plan template that comes with a checklist. Because like a lot of times you have a birth plan, it's like, yeah, I need a birth plan. What goes on this birth plan? And like, what even will they offer me at the hospital? And what can I accept and decline? And so I have a template that you can like plug and play basically your preferences, but it comes with a checklist that actually shows you what all of those preferences could be. So I have that for free online that can be downloaded, and it comes out in a beautiful Canva template that's like designed by me and just nice to look at. And your healthcare providers will like it too, because it's just one page, so they can skim it, and they're very busy. So they like one-page birth plans. And then if you want extra help in actually like how to think about the birth planning process and where to go to find, the evidence on the pros and cons about all of the interventions that could be offered to you, I have a little mini course that you can take, and I keep it really low cost because I want it to be accessible for people to be able to have some support. It's like having me on the room with you, talking you through how to write your birth plan essentially and where to go to get the information. So that, and it's all on demand. So you can just like purchase it and watch it at your own time. And then I also do one-on-one virtual consultations with anybody who's pregnant, anywhere from, reviewing your birth plan or, how to actually implement your birth plan when it's time, like what to do if your doctor is like going against your birth plan, talking to you and your partner about how to be advocates for each other in the hospital. So I do one-on-one virtual sessions for that as well.
Love it. So many different
things. And if you're in San Diego and you're listening, I serve all of San Diego County, and I am filling up, but still have some spots available for sure. So yeah.
Okay. The word is out.
The word is out. Yeah.
That's great. Oh, this was so lovely to hear your story. And also, and the work you do, I think it's fascinating just how people end up where they end up. I mean, it's an ongoing journey, but the process and also just the learnings that you've had and through your own experiences. makes you.
Well, thank you, Willow. You asked very good questions that allow us to like go deep. And I love that. It's been really fun getting to know you and chat with you. Thanks for having me on your show.
Thank you so much. That brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoy the show, please rate and review on Apple Podcasts. It makes a big difference for visibility. And even better, share this episode with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode every other Wednesday. If you're interested in working together to elevate your online presence, I'd love to hear from you. Reach out to me on Instagram at whereiswillow. I also hang out on LinkedIn, Willow McDonough. Until then, cheers to carving your own fucking path. I love you.